A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICAN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. So we will start the day with the prelim theme of the day. We will take up culture today. So in culture, themes like dance, music, painting are very important from prelims point of view. So today we will make a list of all the classical dances and then the most important features about each of these classical dance. So you may have a question on a classical dance with 4 options, out of which one of the option may be describing a feature of another classical dance. So it's very important that we understand the differences between the classical dances, what features differentiate them, so that we can distinguish between them. So the most important features which distinguish each of them, that needs to be known. And the second thing that we're going to do is the different types of musical instruments. So you have tat, vitat, vadya, percussion and all those instruments which you will have to make a list of, and for each of this you will have to give examples. So you may have a question like that these are the instruments and they belong to some particular category, out of which one instrument may be belonging to a different category. So it's very important for us to know which of these instruments belong to which of these categories. So this is the prelims theme of the day. Now we will start with the topic of the day, which is related to the DNA technology. So anything that is related to technology will come under your GS paper 3 syllabus. And this is actually a bill. So the issue is related to a DNA technology use and application regulation bill of 2019. As it is a bill and its analysis, it can also come under your GS paper 2. So first, the news item that was there is the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which has pointed out that this particular bill may have several issues which need to be addressed. So first of all, let's understand why this particular bill is necessary. So when we think of a crime scene, so in the crime scene, the criminals usually leave their DNA imprints, no matter what any physical thing that they leave or not, but they will definitely leave their DNA imprints. So that is why DNA fingerprinting of the crime scene is done in order to identify the suspects and then to solve the criminal cases, to know who is the criminal. So therefore this particular bill is it actually makes a profiling of the DNAs collected by the individuals, and then through this profile it is going to be very easy for us to identify who the criminal is. So if we have a DNA database of all the past criminals, past offenders, then and when any crime occurs, then it is very easy for us to see that if the DNA of this the suspect is matching with any of the DNAs that we already have in the profile. So that way it becomes very easy and faster for us to be able to arrive at the convict and arrive at the criminal. So therefore that way the justice delivery or the justice dispensation could be very fast. So this is one of the needs why this DNA technology use and application regulation bill is very important. Even when we talk of the international scenario, more than 60 countries already have enacted a bill related to this. They already have the DNA profiles of the past convicts, the under trials and the sexual offenders. So they have the DNA profiles maintained like that, and that becomes very easy for them to arrive at the criminal of any crime scene. So in the international scenario also, more than 60 countries have already enacted the law, and even in India this particular legislation on the DNA technology has been in the working stage, has been in the draft stage for over 15 years now. Alright, so now let us see what is the issue that is related to the bill. The first thing is that the fear that this database could be misused. For example, if we have a database of all the people who may have committed crimes in the past, so by looking at the database, we may feel that people who belong to a certain community or people belonging to a certain caste are the ones who are more involved in criminal activities. So it may end up giving rise to stereotyping of people based on their community or based on the caste to which they belong, that this particular community is prone to or have a tendency to commit crimes. So such stereotypes may develop in the society, which will be nothing but the misuse of this database. So that one fear is there, that there might be such profiling of individuals or communities or castes, that this particular caste or community is more prone to committing crimes as seen by the already available database. So this amounts to misuse of the database. The second issue, of course, is a privacy issue, that privacy of the individual is definitely involved here, because the information that is collected is very sensitive information. The DNA can reveal many things regarding the individual, so it is the privacy and sensitive information that is involved, and when it is maintained in the form of a database, and also the cybersecurity architecture is not that robust, then there are chances of these databases being hacked and the privacy of the people being compromised. The third issue is the consent issue. So whenever any DNA is to be extracted from the people, the bill says that their consent will be taken. But there may be cases when the individual may refuse the consent to extract his or her DNA. In such cases, what the bill says is the magistrate can override such a consent. That is, when the individual cannot give a consent, then the magistrate can override it. So in such cases, the bill does not come out with any clear grounds or any clear reasons as to when a magistrate can override it. So therefore, this is considered to be a very big flaw in the bill, that a magistrate can override any such cases without any sound and strong reason, and therefore the consent may be just deemed to be taken in most of the cases, and the DNA samples ending up being collected. So the consent issue is the third issue related to this. Next is the discrimination. Why discrimination? Because as we already discussed, the DNA information is very sensitive, and it involves starting from the skin color of the person to the behavior, the illness that the person may have, his health status, all of these, or whether the genetic composition of the person is such that he is vulnerable to a particular disease. All of that can be seen from the DNA samples of an individual. So this may lead to discrimination, that okay, this person is vulnerable to such and such a disease, so he should not be employed in the industry. Or for example, insurance should not be given to this person because his DNA analysis shows that he is prone to such and such a disease. So this one database might start discrimination against the individuals on various aspects in his private life. So these are the various concerns which are associated with this particular bill that was elaborated in this article. So all these issues are now the Standing Committee on Science and Technology, which is headed by Jairam Ramesh, has now held that this particular legislation has these issues which now needs to be tackled, which now needs to be considered, and only then the bill needs to be passed. So this can also be quoted as an example when you are talking about the parliamentary standing committees, because it was a parliamentary standing committee on science and technology which has now taken up this issue, that this particular bill has several issues which need to be discussed and deliberated upon. So you can cite this as an example when you are talking about any question on parliamentary standing committees as well. So apart from that, this bill and its analysis itself is a very important topic. So these four are the important issues which are related to this particular bill. Now we'll move on to the next. So this is about the need for an independent fiscal council. So it is an independent fiscal council, so anything that is related to budgets and the performance of the government, fiscal performance, comes under GS paper 3, and also because it relates to the budget and implementation of the policies and all, it may come in your GS paper 2 as well. So what this whole article is talking about is that we do need an independent fiscal council that can measure the fiscal performance of the government and also ensure the fiscal accountability of the government to the parliament. So that is the primary role of an independent fiscal council, and this whole article argues why is it that an independent fiscal council is important. If you remember, a couple of days before we had an article discussed on the ICANN video that we do not actually need an independent fiscal council. The current arrangements are already more than sufficient. It's just that they need to be utilized to the maximum extent to ensure the fiscal accountability of government. So just by setting up an independent fiscal council is not going to serve the purpose until and unless it is actually made independent, and for that matter the current available arrangements can themselves be strengthened to serve the same purpose. So what we will be looking at in this article is the other half of a question that can come on the independent fiscal council. That is, yes, we need an independent council and the arguments for it. So this article first of all begins by saying why is it that we need a fiscal council. First we will look at the fiscal consolidation. Fiscal consolidation has been on the agenda of the government for the past several decades now. So if you look at the fiscal deficit data of the government for 2019 and 20, the fiscal deficit of the center as has been estimated by the Controller General of Accounts was 4.6%. And this year the deficit is estimated to be even more than 7% of the GDP, even though the budget estimate was at 3.5% of GDP. So this increase in the fiscal deficit, we know for obvious reasons that we have the corona pandemic and the revenue of the government has fallen. At the same time, the expenditure of the government has increased manyfold. So all of this figure, it shows that the finances of the government are definitely a cause of concern, and we need to get back on the path of fiscal consolidation. So this independent fiscal council, by ensuring that there is a scientific analysis of the budgetary data, can help us to go back on this path of fiscal consolidation, particularly when the center's finances due to the COVID and the corona crisis has become a cause of concern. So this is the first thing, that the need to go on this path of fiscal consolidation again because of these worrying statistics explains the need of an independent fiscal council. The second is the need for transparency. So now all the policies of the government are they are financed through the budget, but however if we look at analyze the government's expenditures over the past couple of years, we see that these extra budgetary financing has increased. So when I say extra budgetary financing, it means that financing something, but that finance is not going through the budget but rather outside the budget. So why is this method even followed by the government? Because when the government has to make an expenditure on something, and if that is allocated in the budget, then that will definitely reflect the government finances. So if the government is spending more through the budget, then it will show that the government has a fiscal deficit. But if the same expenditure is channeled outside of the budget, then it cannot come in the computation of the fiscal deficit, and then it is shown as the other expenditure which is not done through the budget. So thereby the government can then show that its fiscal deficit is within the limits as has been estimated or as has been targeted. So this is one reason why the governments more often they resort to these extra budgetary financing. So if I give you two examples, you will clearly understand what this extra budgetary financing means. So for example, if the government wants to provide food subsidy, then the food subsidy has to be provided to the Food Corporation of India. But the government does not have the money to do that. So what the Food Corporation of India is made to do is the FCI will borrow from the National Small Savings Fund. So that fund which is borrowed by the FCI is then used for meeting the expenditure towards food security. Similarly, think about this. We need to build irrigation projects. So for financing the irrigation projects, the long-term irrigation fund that is created by the NABARD is used. So it is not the budgetary finances that are used to meet these objectives, but rather some other financial source. So in this case, it is a long-term irrigation fund that is created by NABARD which is being used. So because of these extra budgetary financing, it is not possible for the people to understand the overall fiscal performance of the government, because the figures of fiscal deficit as shown by the government may be something else if we take into consideration these extra budgetary financing also. So even for a common man, it is difficult to ascertain how has the government performed fiscally. So therefore there is more need for transparency in the budgets, and this can be again ensured with the help of an independent fiscal council. So these are the reasons why an independent fiscal council is the need of the hour. So when we talk of the independent fiscal council, first the 13th Finance Commission had also recommended that we will need such a body. Even the FRBM review committee that was headed by N.K. Singh had also recommended that we should have an independent fiscal council. The 14th Finance Commission too recommended the same thing. And also Viral Acharya, who is the former deputy governor of the RBI, he has written a book that is called as The Quest for Restoring Financial Stability in India. So it's The Quest for Restoring Financial Stability in India. This is a book written by the former deputy governor of RBI. So even in this particular book, he has called for the establishment or for the setting up of an independent fiscal council. So now let's understand, if we set up this independent fiscal council, what should its mandate be? First is, it will provide for a public review of the FRBM compliance. So FRBM has set some targets related to the revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and the debt to GDP ratio and all that. So this independent fiscal council is going to make a review of how the government is performing with respect to the FRBM targets, how far it is from reaching these targets, and how well the government has performed. So basically, regarding its FRBM compliance, the fiscal council is going to review the actions of the government. The second is the fiscal impact of the policies. So whatever policies the government is announcing, the fiscal council is going to analyze the fiscal impact of these policies, and it may also come out with alternative policies and make a suggestion to the government that such alternative policies are going to have a better or a more optimum use of their fiscal resources. So it is going to study the fiscal impact of the government policies as well. And third, it is going to study the overall fiscal performance of the government. So how far has how much better the government has fared in collecting its revenues, and how much optimum and how judiciously has the expenditure been incurred by the government. So such fiscal performance of the government is also going to be analyzed by the fiscal council. And finally, it is going to enhance the fiscal accountability of the government to the parliament. So this fiscal council is going to report to the parliament, and through this report of the independent fiscal council, the debates in the parliament will become even more focused, and they will also be more objective and targeted. So this way, the fiscal accountability of the government to the parliament is also going to increase. Now let's see the importance. As I said, the debates in the parliament are going to be more fruitful. They are going to be more targeted at how the government has fared in its fiscal performance. So therefore, the debates in the parliament are going to be more focused, and it will extract the exact things or the exact picture of the fiscal performance of the government. Next is, it is going to discourage populist shifts in the policy. Many times you might have seen that during the election, some populist policies are announced by the government. So this independent fiscal council, as it provides an objective overview and a review of the government's policies and the fiscal impact of these policies, it is definitely going to discourage the government from making such populist shifts in its policies. Third is, it is also going to give you scientific estimates. And now the budgetary estimates and what actually happens, there is a lot of divergence. So this is because these estimates are not very thorough and not based on thorough analytics. So what the independent fiscal council is also going to do is it will lead to more precise analysis of the data that is collected from various sources, and the budgetary estimates that it is going to make regarding the macroeconomic fundamentals or the variables. So those estimates are going to be more precise, that will be made by the independent fiscal council. So these are the importance of the fiscal council, and all of these will show the reasons why we must set up an independent fiscal council. So when we talk of the international scenario, in the international level also, many countries have already set up with councils which are equivalent to the independent fiscal council. And according to the International Monetary Fund, there are 36 countries which have their own independent fiscal institutions. 36 countries across the world had their own IFIs in 2014, and after that more number of countries have established institutions similar to the independent fiscal institutes. So these institutes have similar mandate, that is, they will take up an independent analysis and review of the government's fiscal policies. They will also make macroeconomic and budgetary projections, and they will also present to the policy makers with alternative policy options which may utilize the fiscal resources more judicially. So in this case, you can quote in your answers the case study of Belgium. So Belgium has a body that's called as Federal Planning Bureau. So this Federal Planning Bureau is going to make the macroeconomic forecasts, and the government is legally required to adopt these macroeconomic forecasts made by the Federal Planning Bureau. So these forecasts made by the FPB and its adoption by the government has actually led to a significant reduction in the bias in the estimates. So the estimates have become more precise and more concise, and this has led to a reduction in the bias in the estimates. So you can quote the case study of Belgium and its Federal Planning Bureau. Similarly, United Kingdom also has an office that's called as the Office for Budget Responsibility. So it's the Office for Budget Responsibility, and ever since this body has come, this has also played a very important role in restoring the fiscal sustainability in UK. So this is another example of UK which can be quoted in the answers. So by showing this international scenario and the success study in terms of the international case studies, you can say that we do need an independent fiscal council. So now we move to the next topic, which is related to the taxation reforms. So this will become a part of your GS paper 3. So recently we already have discussed in detail what are the recent taxation reforms that has been announced by the Prime Minister on 13th of August. So it is honoring the honest, and it has basically two pillars. One is the faceless assessment and appeal, and the other is easing the compliance for the honest taxpayers. So for this, the assessment has been made faceless. There is no physical interface between the income tax department and the taxpayer. So all of these we have already discussed in detail. So let's see what is a backdrop in which these taxation reforms have been announced. Why is it important that we need to reform the taxation system? So let's understand what the data speaks. If we look at the number of taxpayers in India, out of a population of 1.35 billion, just 15 million have paid taxes in India. So this is a very small number compared to the overall population of the country who are paying the taxes in India. And if we also look at the direct tax to the GDP ratio, so this has been stagnating in India at about 5.5%. So this again shows that in our overall GDP, the contribution of direct tax has been very, very less. This is because very few people, of course, are paying the taxes. So this again shows that we need to widen our tax base, and also it may show that there may be tax evasion on a large scale that is happening, because of which very few people are paying taxes. And those who are paying taxes are also not paying taxes on their entire income honestly. So these two facts and figures show that the taxation reforms are very important, and that is why we had these reforms. So in this case, a 2016 report says that the top 10% of the Indians who earn 55% of the nation's income. So 55% of India's income is earned by just the top 10% of Indians. Okay, so this shows how the wealth is concentrated at this top 10% of the Indians. So even if all this 10% of the Indians who actually have 55% of India's income, so if this entire 10% is actually brought under the tax net, and if they would have paid their taxes honestly, even then the income tax to GDP ratio would have become nearly 18% from the current 5.5%. And if we talk of the direct tax actually comprises of income tax and even corporate tax. So just the income tax to GDP ratio would have become 18% if this top 10% of the people who account for 55% of the nation's income, if they had paid their taxes honestly, then the income tax to GDP ratio would have become 18%. And if we were to include even the corporate tax in this, then the direct tax to GDP ratio would have become more than 20%. So this shows that this top 10% of the people are not paying their taxes wholly, and in this top 10% who own 55% of the country's wealth, this doesn't even include in the counting the black money that is generated in the economy. The black economy is not even included in computing the total income of the country. So if we include the black money, then this tax to GDP ratio is going to be much more further, and this 55% of income is the declared income, and the top 10% who are paying the taxes are the ones who are paying the taxes but not complete taxes for all their income. So if we include with this the black money also that is getting generated in the economy, then the tax to GDP ratio is going to be much more than 20%. So this figures show that there is a need for the taxation reforms, and there is a need for, on the one hand, to ensure that the people feel it is very easy to file their returns, it is very easy to file their pay their taxes, and also it must be ensured that the black money that is there in the economy is also brought under the tax net. So now there is also this feeling that the income tax department is very corrupt, and many times when people go there to file their taxes or file their returns, then they will pay some bribe to the officers, and the officers will let go of the income, and that income will never come under the tax net. In order to prevent such an interface between the taxpayer and the department, now the faceless assessment has come, and in this faceless assessment there are 4 units. So one is the assessment unit, next is a verification unit, next is a review unit, and then is a technical unit. So the department has now been divided into these 4 units, and one particular case will go through all of these units, and also there is complete anonymity between the assessing officer who is assessing the income tax return of the taxpayer and also the taxpayer. There is complete anonymity. So one person's returns and his accounts is now going to go to different assessing officers who are in different parts of the country. So therefore all of these will lead to ensuring the fact that there is no physical interface between the department and the taxpayer. The taxpayer is not harassed, and nor is the departmental officials being bribed for letting go of the income. So more income is going to come under the tax net, and also because of no physical interface, people are going to find it more easy to be able to file their returns and pay their taxes. So these are the facts and figures which show that the reforms in the taxation system was needed, and that is why they have been now brought about. Now we go to the next topic, which is an example of empathy. So empathy, when I talk of empathy or altruism, sympathy, transparency, accountability, these are the various keywords that will come under your GS paper 4, that is ethics. And for each of these keywords you must have examples ready beforehand, because in the exam like conditions it is not possible for you to come out with realistic examples when asked. So in today's this newspaper Reality on the Big Screen, though the entire article was about something else, but there was one small paragraph which can be used as an example of empathy in your GS4 ethics answers. So this plane crash that happened in Kozhikode in Kerala, so we already know about it. It had led to the death of the pilot and the co-pilot, and several people were injured. So this we already knew. So what this the example of empathy that is mentioned in this article is that, so the people nearing that the crash site, that is what one district called as the Malapuram district. In the Malapuram district, the residents, when they heard this very huge sound and noise, then they thought that there was some accident, and they started coming out in large numbers to participate in the rescue operations. So these residents, they heard the noise and they swung into action, and when they rushed to the spot, they saw that the accident has taken place. They then immediately informed their friends. They collaborated and they came together on WhatsApp groups, and they mobilized all the support that is needed, and they were trying to help out the affected passengers. They were trying to shift them to the hospitals in their own vehicles. And even when they were taken to the hospitals, these people were waiting there in queues patiently, so that if the patients need any help, like blood for instance, then these people could provide that donate blood to those injured passengers. So for that they were waiting very patiently in the queues in the hospital, and because of the help of the people, the rescue operation was very fast and more lives of the people could be saved. So this gesture by the local population definitely is an example of human empathy. So this you can describe in your answer to show that how this is the example of empathy, and this is not just shown by a single person or two, but rather by the entire community. So many people, the local population there, they showed this quality of empathy. So this can be used to quote in your answers as an example. Now we move on to the next topic, which is related to India's foreign policy. This definitely comes under your GS paper too. So what this one of this article, this one was written by C. Raja Mohan, and this article was also written by one of the former ambassadors of India. So these two articles, they had a very similar topic about which they were talking about. So basically one of the central piece of India's foreign policy, if we talk about today, is what is called as a strategic autonomy. So we have read and discussed about this particular topic even in several of the previous ICAN videos. We have discussed about strategic autonomy and how has India maintained its strategic autonomy even in the past and today as well. So when we talk of strategic autonomy, recently our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has also said that it's very important for us to de-risk the supply chains. So it is important for us to de-risk the supply chains. So why did he say this? Because when we talk of strategic autonomy, it also is about the excessive economic dependence that India has on China. So if we are looking for an active decoupling with China in economic terms, so therefore it is very important to look at from this perspective of de-risking the supply chain. So this means what the External Affairs Minister was referring to is that we need to rearrange the global economic order. So now there is an excessive dependence on China, and from here we need to shift to a new global order where we are de-risking the supply chains, and these supply chains are not excessively dependent on China. So that is where we need to go from the current economic order, which is excessively dependent on China. So this de-risking the supply chain and moving to a new economic order where we do not have excessive dependence on China is is an integral part of our strategic autonomy. So that has to be done if we need to ensure our strategic autonomy. So what C. Raja Mohan also explains is how in the 1990s our strategic autonomy was about something else, and now our strategic autonomy is about something different. In the 1990s, our focus was on the United States. So United States during that time, it wanted to interfere in the Kashmir dispute that India always maintained was a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. But United States wanted to interfere in the Kashmir dispute in India. And in the 1990s, we also did our nuclear tests, and United States had imposed sanctions. So we were amidst all of that. So our focus during that time, if we had to ensure strategic autonomy, so our focus that time was to just ward off the United States whatever intervention or the political threats of the United States that needs to be warded off to ensure strategic autonomy. So that was our entire focus during that time. So if we look back, we see how it was possible for us to ensure that the US did not interfere in the Kashmir dispute, and at the same time US also collaborated with India in spite of the nuclear the tests that we conducted. In spite of that, the United States in fact it changed its own domestic law to be able to collaborate with India on the nuclear issue. So this way it shows how our strategic autonomy was there during the 1990s as well, that in spite of the United States wanting to interfere in Kashmir, we did not allow that to happen, and in spite of the US sanctions, US later on went on to amend its own domestic law to collaborate with India on the nuclear issue. So this shows how strategic autonomy as a principle of the foreign policy was successful during the 1990s. So the difference is that during the 1990s, our strategic autonomy was about the United States political threats and how we can fend it off, which we successfully did. And now the focus of the strategic autonomy is on the excessive dependence that we have on China. So it was in this context that our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has commented that we need to de-risk the supply chains. So we need to have a rearrangement of the global economic order from one where we have excessive dependence on China to one where we have our strategic autonomy back. So how did we do that? How do we do that? How are we showing this strategic autonomy even now when we are excessively dependent on China? So first we realized that we are having a very huge trade deficit with China, so which was nearly 55 billion in 2019 was the trade deficit which we had with China. So therefore we realized that it's very important for us to reduce our imports from China, not just to reduce the trade deficit, but also the cheap Chinese imports were actually wiping out India's domestic industrial base because of the extremely cheap imports from China. So this was another reason why we thought that we need to restrict the cheap imports from China. And also to ensure that India is not flooded with the cheap imports from China, India also backed out of the regional comprehensive economic partnership, the RCEP negotiations. Also India did not participate in it. So India was doing all of these things. So these measures like reducing the imports from China, not taking part in the RCEP negotiations, all of these show that India was following a policy of passive commercial withdrawal. So slowly it was trying to reduce its economic dependence on China, which is termed as passive commercial withdrawal. But however, now that China has shown so much aggression in the Ladakh and the Galwan Valley, what we are now following is a shift from the passive commercial withdrawal, and now what we are following is an active economic decoupling. So this is a shift that we have had. So we were following the policy of passive commercial withdrawal, and now we have shifted to active economic decoupling from China after the China has shown aggression in the Galwan Valley. So these two are the very important terms which you must write in your answer, that is passive commercial withdrawal was our earlier policy, and now after the Galwan aggression we have shifted to the policy of active economic decoupling. So now we are actively looking for all those areas where we can reduce our dependence on China and how we can economically decouple with China. So now this is what our strategic autonomy is about. Our strategic autonomy is focused now on ensuring that we completely decouple from China in the economic sphere. So for this, what we are doing is India is also looking for more security partnership with the United States, Japan, Australia. So it is trying to increase the number of partners and also broaden its partners in the Indo-Pacific region as well. So this is what India is doing. So this whole article was basically about our strategic autonomy in the 1990s, how it was and how we dealt with it, and what our strategic autonomy is focusing at present with the China's increasing power, and also how we have shifted from a passive commercial withdrawal to an active economic decoupling. So there was another article that was written again by India's ambassador. What that article spoke about was a strategic equilibrium. So what that article says is India is seeking to achieve a strategic equilibrium with China. So this is what this was a statement given by the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar himself, that India is trying to seek strategic equilibrium with China. But however, China does not want to have a strategic equilibrium with India. What China wants to have is a hierarchy, basically, where it wants to place itself at the top, and it knows that India has a place somewhere below in the hierarchy, and it can never be at strategic equilibrium with China. China knows that when we talk in terms of the GDP and the growth rate, India is much below compared to China. And when we talk of the military modernization also, again China is much superior to India. And apart from these, China has always been engaging in things where it is trying to put off India from trying to compete with China. For instance, India wants to enter these nuclear governance bodies like NSG and all, which China is opposing. Then India wants to have reforms in the UNSC, which again China is opposing. So similarly, wherever India is trying to grow, China has always been objecting that, and China has also been trying to encircle India whether it is through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the Belt and Road Initiative, the Trans-Himalayan Connectivity Network with Nepal. So it is just trying to undermine India in the region and is trying to be more aggressive and display its economic strength in the region. Why? Because India is seeking to have rather strategic equilibrium with China, but China does not want to have strategic equilibrium with India. It clearly wants to show that there is a hierarchy in which China is at the apex and India is somewhere below. So it does not want India to enjoy that position of equality with China. So this is what even C. Rajamohan had written in one of the previous articles of the recognition of this power differential. So power differential is a term here that what C. Rajamohan said, that China wants to make India understand that there is a power differential between India and China, and that is going to be there in the future as well. So therefore, there is no strategic equilibrium that is possible between India and China, and this is the message that China wants to drive home to India. So this is about the strategic equilibrium and from what India seeks to achieve and which China does not want to accept. Next is a small topic on the contribution of Indians in science and technology, is a topic under your GS3 syllabus. So in this case, a team of scientists from this Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics in Pune, they have discovered one of the earliest galaxies, and this discovery of one of the earliest galaxies was done by using India's own multi-wavelength satellite, which is the AstroSat. So AstroSat was used to discover this one of the earliest galaxies, and this was done by a team of scientists, and this team of scientists was led by an Indian, Dr. Kanak Saha. So this you can quote as an example if a question comes on what has been the contribution of Indians in the science and technology. So right from the ancient era till currently, this is the most recent. So you can conclude with this most recent contribution. So this is directly related to your syllabus, so it isn't. Next was just a data on education, though this article was on something else, but a small piece of data is very important in this. So it is the National Family Health Survey NFHS 4 data shows that in among the women who are aged between 15 and 49 years, and based on the number of years of schooling that they have completed, it says that 42% of ST women and 33% of SC women, they have received no schooling. So this is what the data of the NFHS 4 survey says, that 42% of ST women and 33% of SC women have received no schooling, and only 10% of ST women and only 15% of SC women have actually completed their 12 plus years of education. While if we compare that with the general category, then 30% of the women in the general category have completed 12 plus years of education, while for SC and ST women it is 10 and 15% respectively. So this data is very important when you're talking about the education becoming more accessible to people, and it is bridging the inequality in the society. So in such cases, it's very important to point out that education needs to be more inclusive of these backward sections as well. So this data is important from that perspective. These were the other articles from Saturday and Tuesday, that is today, which were not important from the exam point of view. So today we have covered Saturday's, that is 22nd August, and today's, that 4 newspapers we have covered today. So today's prelims question that is related to current events is India's first Dragonfly festival. So this was there in, I think, I don't know if it was today's newspaper or Saturday's newspaper. So this was there in the newspaper that I read today. So India's first Dragonfly festival, where will it be organized and who is organizing it? So even UPSC has asked such questions even before on where such festival was organized for the first time, or where this particular animal or whatever was found for the first time. So all of these kinds of questions UPSC has asked before. So this is very important. Do find it. And as far as the revision strategy is concerned, I hope you have gone through that 40 days revision strategy and you're all revising really well. Waste no time, be on your toes and keep revising. That's it for today. Thank you.